What's up, everyone? How's it going? This is dance coach Rudy V. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Um, and if anybody's watching me on Instagram, hello as well. I'm live on Instagram uh, and also YouTube. If you just came in, go down and read my description below. Um, go if you need some dance lessons. I teach salsa, bachata, cumbia, cha-cha-cha, merengue, rockabilly jives, swing, house dancing, and popping. And you could get a hold of me below at my Instagram accounts. Just click on the links. Also, go to my website below as well. And I offer dance classes in the San Fernando Valley and dance classes and private lessons as well. So send me a message if you're interested. Um, so today is actually I. So as you guys know, I'm a dance. I call myself a dance coach. I've been teaching dance for quite a while, and I've been a dancer for a long time. Started as a kid in the 80s as a popper and breaker. 90's became a house dancer, um, and, um, and then started learning all the Latin dances and swing and rockabilly jive, and even took up some ballroom, uh, but mainly like Latin ballroom. Anyways, so yeah, I'm coming on here and I talk about any all things that have to do with dance. So I'll definitely be making more videos coming soon. Um, Sometimes my schedule's so busy, doing all these private lessons and teaching dance classes. But today's topic is the 90's rebel house dance scene in Los Angeles. And I'm doing these videos to kind of preserve the history because you got a lot of people misrepresenting the history out here of the history of dance out here in Los Angeles at times. Sometimes you don't hear the people who are actually involved in it. You hear people who are just like looky loos or bystanders, never really knew how to dance, never danced right, or they maybe came later in the scene when it already died out, and they're claiming that certain dances were existed during that time. And I see a lot of misrepresentation of the 90's house scene, and especially the rebel house dance scene. Okay, so let me tell you how I got involved in the whole house dance scene. And out here in Los Angeles, there was a time where I would say in the late 80's, right, when there was a whole scene out here. Um, I started off as a tagger, right? I was involved in the tagging scene, tagging crews and everything, and eventually the taggers started, doing backyard parties or started dancing at school. Sometimes DJs would come around and they started doing a lot of different dances. And somewhere down the line, the taggers, uh, they were actually, they started getting into like house music, and and taggers were actually the early ravers. A lot of what you see in the rave scene, it came from taggers. All the baggy pants and the backpacks and sometimes the graffiti flyers and everything. Especially back in the day when you saw house dance flyers, there was a lot of graffiti back then. And back then, we were doing different dances back then. We were definitely kind of transitioning. I mean, some of us were still into popping and everything and waving and all that. But then came, we started doing house dance steps too, And I remember in high school, like they would have a DJ, and all of a sudden the Tigers were starting to transition into house music, right? Before it was all about hip hop, right? But then they started transitioning to house music, and they started wearing the Jinko pants, Carl Kanai, cross colors. That started being, a lot of house dancers were starting to wear that, and at that time, the Jinko pants weren't overly exaggerated as you see now, where they look like parachutes, right? I mean, they look huge now, but back then they were a little bit more. They weren't skinny jeans, heck no, but they were more like a little like kind of like was it boot cut or something like that, or a little bit baggy. Eventually, yeah, the cross colors influence. So they started coming out with baggy pants. The Jinko started coming out with baggy pants, and at times a lot of us will buy even knockoffs. We would go to like some of these stores out here in the San Fernando Valley. Like they had like stores like in Pacoima where they would sell wannabe like cross colors and wannabe Jankos at some of these Korean stores. And so we would buy that, and some of us would sport, we'd dress like tigers, we would have our Adidas with the fat laces, the baggy pants, the baggy shirts, but we were playing like, techno and house and all that, rave in some sense, as they call it. Um, and they started getting into that, and then they're starting to there was a there was a transition where house tigers were starting to look more like housers now. They started wearing vests, with white shirts, uh, they started shaving their heads, and they had the little the hair right here. Sometimes it would be like a pompadour or a little piece of hair that they would comb back or to the side. It was a style that they had back then. And then we started wearing boots instead of the Adidas and the fat laces. We would wear boots, black shiny boots, back then. And we started looking more like housers, right? And then we started sporting the big belt buckles, right? We took in our white shirts and have the big belt buckle and have the vest, and you know, it was pretty. We had our own style, right? And so they started playing a lot of house music, in high schools, at parties, and this and that. And you hear it in a lot of places back then, and it became really popular. And this was like late 80s, and then it started happening in the 90s as well, early 90s. And from there, it's like after like me, I graduated from high school, and I started going to college. Then I started hitting the club scene, and a lot of us out here in Los Angeles, me coming from the San Fernando Valley 818, we would go to Hollywood, right? And that's where all the club scene would be at, right? And you know, and so I had a friend who invited me to the arena back then, and the arena was happening, man. It was jam packed, full of brown people, full of Mexicans, right? Sometimes you'll have some Filipinos, but mostly Mexicans, right? The DJs would be Mexican, and some of the most world famous DJs and legends came out of the arena. You had DJ Poogie Bear, DJ Irene. I mean, there was a lot of people, and at that time, they were playing that hard techno house, hard house at that time, you know, and it wasn't really soft, right? It was hard, bam, 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 like and this is what actually got people to actually dance hard, and it was came out to be known as hard house, right? Some people later call it hard style and this and that. Um, but there was a subgroup of all this scene right here. Actually, there was several of them. Some were called groovers, and usually groovers dress more like taggers, aka ravers, and they would do a lot of popping, a lot of waving and popping. Um, and then there came also rebel dancers too, and so the rebels were wearing sometimes the Harleys or just black shiny boots, or sometimes black shiny shoes that kind of look like dress shoes, but kind of like a boot style, and they would wear, you know, either those Jankos or some of those big pants, or even like even regular Levi's, and they would cut like a little, like in the seam, they would cut it like you would have your boot and there would be like a little cut and the pants would go like that, right? And sometimes we would shred them too around. So we would have our boots and we have shredded pants and it would be cut at the seam. And I'm starting to see a lot of younger people these days trying to bring that 90s style back, it's trying to bring back that, some of them are wearing the baggy jeans, or some of them are trying to cut the pants like the rebels back then. Even tigers cut the seams as well too. So, but yeah, so we had the rebels back then, and we wore our big belts with the belt buckle, our vests, and our shirts, and we would comb our hair, that little style that I just mentioned earlier. Some people had pompadours, some people didn't. Some people had just a little piece in the front. But yeah, and then you went to the arena back in the 90s, and it was just jam packed, man. It was jam packed. Really hardcore hard house music there, techno, and it wasn't slow or boring. This is one of the criticisms I have of the new house scene. It just got, I think, after the 2000s, it just got watered down. The 2000s house scene kind of died out, in my opinion, out here in Los Angeles. So the golden era was pretty much the 90s out here, the 90s. And if you were at the arena, if you were at the dome, those were the main spots right there of the LA house dance scene. You know, they may have other places and everything, but I never seen any other place that was happening as much as the arena and the dome. And so we had the arena, and it was crazy back then. It was crazy. It was jam packed, and you would have rebels dancing there and battling people, and I would see rebels all the time, just getting down with their, people would be around them in a circle, and they would just bam, like just, some really nice moves and pretty cool dancing, and they didn't do none of this what you see is the rocking step or the shuffle from the Melbourne. Um, the rebels had their own style, and it wasn't none of that little shuffle that you see these days. I kind of don't really like that style as an old school rebel dancer, or that rocking style. And I even actually confronted some people out here who are claiming that was a 90s dance, that rocking stuff. They even made videos, 90s, and they're over here doing that rocking style. If you don't know what that rocking style is, it's usually when you see them with their feet, they're going like that, like that, and like something like that. And I debated people, and they still can't. They never won a debate on that. So they're claiming that came from the 90s, and it wasn't out here in the 90s. I didn't see a majority of people. I didn't see a majority of women. I never seen any women actually dancing with that rocking style or that shuffle style. That came later in the 2000s. So, and let's keep the history correct, and this is from someone who's actually been in the 90s house scene in Los Angeles, and I've been in a lot of places. I mean, even Grand Avenue, a lot of underground raves. I've been to the first raves out here in Los Angeles and everything. And, I remember attending the Coliseums and all that. And so from what I saw, I remember that they never done that shuffle or that rocking dance. So the way the rebels danced, they were more they did a lot of hand movements, right? They had more rhythm, and they also did like a lot of ground moves too, like not breakdancing moves, but kind of like the ground moves where it kind of looked like almost like the Russian dance, right? And you know, um, and I also seen danzantes, Aztec dancers, when they're doing those ground moves. I'm thinking maybe that influenced the rebel style or something like that. But the rebel style had many elements to it, many dance styles of previous years. They have what's called whacking. Back then in the rebel house dancing, we didn't call it whacking. you know, they they had different hand styles and gestures. So would mix it with whacking, waving, liquid back then. Um, you know, it was different styles with the hands, and it wasn't just footwork. So a lot of these new generation house dancers out here in LA, they go and learn house dance, and they think that's the only style, and most of that style that they learn is from the East Coast. They because the dance instructors are teaching mostly the East Coast house dancing. And don't get me wrong, I respect the East Coast house dancing. There's some dope moves there. I actually do some of that as well. But the rebel style was an LA thing, right? Los Angeles thing. Because out here in the West Coast, we influenced a lot of the house dancing when it came to the whacking, the tutting. Later on in the rave scene, you start seeing liquid and tutting. That all came from the popping scene, the West Coast scene, right? Um, so, so the rebel style, we started doing our own thing, especially amongst Mexicans out here, brown folks out here in the clubs. We created our own style. We had our own scene. A lot of times you hear about the house dance scene and house dance history, and people it's just all about black, right? But brown folks out here in Los Angeles put it down and made history. We were here as well at the beginning of the house dance scene, and so definitely the clubs were happening, playing a lot of dope music. Uh, DJ Poogie Bear, This is Los Angeles, man. All that hard. We had a lot of DJs, a lot of brown DJs out here. Underground um, brown DJs. Some of them you never even heard of, right? You just hear about the famous ones who continued on, but there was a lot of brown house DJs back then, and a lot of brown house dancers too. Some of them retired; they no longer dancing, right? Me, I kept dancing. I just see it as a good. It's like I stuck with it where I enjoy the music. I enjoy the house scene. I still sometimes go to house dance clubs and I get down, and I see it as fun, enjoying the dances and art. It's also an exercise, man. I remember I used to hit the clubs and I would come out sweating, man. I was like, man, it's like I went to a cardio dance class. Um, so the arena was crazy. It was jam packed. It was bumping. You should have seen the lines even to get into the arena. Those lines would go all the way around and everything, and it was crazy, man. I mean, you had people battling and dancing, enjoying the music, and it was a legendary place, and that was like in I think it was on Santa Monica Boulevard and everything. And then you had what was called the Dome at the Florentine Gardens in Hollywood. Now the Dome, man, it was happening. You had all kinds of DJs coming in, um, especially from a group called the Movement. Um, you had DJ Richard Humpty Vision at that time, right? Known as DJ Richard Vision. He's the one that started the Power Tools on Power 106 out here in Los Angeles, and I actually I remember one of the reasons why I got into house music is I would listen to Power 106 and also MTV too, but Power 106 was like they would have late at night power tools playing. I was just listening to this music. I was hearing Richard Vision, like, playing some dope music. I'm like, oh man, this is really cool. And I started bumping this. Yeah, I even took like a radio to school and I was bumping all that stuff. I had like a little radio I would put on right here, and I'll be playing that. A lot of my friends would do that too. They would put radios in their backpacks and be bumping some of that house music and everything, passing out rave flyers and all that stuff, backyard parties and all that. Actually, I had a friend from Matrix Entertainment. Matrix, right? Was it Matrix Unity? We There was a group out here in the San Fernando Valley called Matrix, and I was involved with them and passing out their flyers and all that. And it was they actually even became they went to even started becoming club promoters, and they're still doing it to this very day. I've even actually worked for them for a little bit. Um, they did clubs like at Giggles and the Roomba Room and was it Vive right now? But yeah, they still even play Latin house and everything. They're more on the Latin music now, but they do incorporate Latin house and everything. So there's some history with me and Matrix. Um, but yeah, I was involved in that all the way even back in high school. I actually had one of the Matrix brothers in my class, and that's how I met him. But yeah, it's just the house scene was happening, and so you had the dome, you know, Richard Vision would always mention it on the power tools and all that. So I went down to the Florentine Gardens, and man, there was some nice different nights, different DJs, and sometimes they would have multiple DJs in one night. You had Richard Vision. I'm trying to remember all of them. You had I think it was Tony B or something like that back then, and you had uh, there's so many more. There was so many DJs back then. Actually, the movement was involved and they made actually a, a a CD called Aqua Boogie, and it was AJ Mora, DJ Hayes, and DJ Richard Humpty Vision. And actually, I still, um, I know DJ Hayes. If you guys know, they made the movement made an early techno song. They're known. I don't know if you guys ever heard it. Are you ready? They play that sometimes at the Laker games and everything, different places. But they were popular. They came on Power 106. I remember they used to play their songs a lot. But yeah, the movement would definitely be down there, and along with other DJs, legendary DJs too, that would show up. Sometimes Bad Boy Bill would come out, come down here to California and play, and there was just so many DJs coming through there, and just playing a lot of cool music, and so they were a little different from the arena. The arena was hard, right? Hard techno, hard house, right? So with the dome, they would play. They would play hard house and techno, but they would also play a lot of even the old school house too. Um, and they would play different types of house too. And but it all had melody, lots of good sounds and everything. Man, the dome, there was so much memories and so much history there. Florentine Gardens, and lots of performers would come down. Lots of performers popular in the house scene would come down and perform too. Um, and sometimes I would watch concerts there, legendary concerts. I'm like, man, this is pretty cool, pretty, you know. And yeah, we would dance the night away, and and I would be dancing, and you would see even rebels battling there too. You should have seen some of the battles. It was crazy. Some of these guys had some really good moves. I actually saw a big chubby guy. He was a rebel. Man, this guy just blew everyone away. You would think he didn't even know how to dance because he was so chubby. Wait, this guy had some moves, and he was doing some like he was doing some Beetlejuice type moves on the floor, and I'm like, man, this is crazy. And it had rhythm and style too. It didn't look like b-boying. It didn't look like popping or nothing like that. It was a rebel style, and I wish I would have had video footage back then, like a camera. I would have recorded a lot of that stuff, man. Because a lot of the rebel battles, back then, a lot of people didn't record them, man. That's just unfortunate. Every time you see the footage of the '90s house scene out here in Los Angeles, you just see regular people dancing, right? You know, um, but you didn't see footage of rebels actually battling each other. It was dope, man. Dope style, you know. And the rebels were popular back then, you know. And so if you knew how to dance like a rebel, man, you would be popular in the clubs, you know. And definitely. So, and it's just so much. I mean, I wish I would have. There's so many name drop names to drop, you know, but to mention basically, and it's just. I remember that there's this performance. Your love is so divine, man. I forgot her name. Shoot, it's been a while. Um, Miranda, that's what it was. Miranda, she performed there, man. It just went off the roof. There was so many others, but and sometimes you would have rebel cliques, you know, and they were all about dancing though, you know, and I noticed that they were just all about dancing, right? They weren't all there trying to fight people and stuff like that. Um, Although you did had backyard parties and some rebels trying to duke it out and this and that. But when it came to the club scene, it was more mature and people were just out there to have fun and dance, you know, and lots of cool music, man. So they put it, that if the dome and the arena were the spots to be at, back then, and and let me tell you this is that, you didn't see no shuffling there, right? You didn't see no rocking, none of that Melbourne stuff, You didn't see none of that, right? And, even the girls, they had a particular style. They weren't doing that rocking style, right? They had a particular style and they would, it's like they had rhythm back then, right? They used their hands. It didn't look all manly, right? The girls actually had different style than the guys. They look more feminine, right? Nowadays, when you see female house dancers, they're trying to look like guys, right? But back then, the women looked more feminine. There was a different style back then, and the guys were into. They had their own style too, and sometimes the rebels would get criticized. Oh, he's shaving his eyebrows, and some of them were a little bit too feminine, and some of them were very masculine, right? Uh, but even either way, like you know, a lot of the women would love the rebel guys. If you were a rebel guy out there, they would jock you. And if you knew how to dance, even more. Um, so yeah, that whole rebel style, man, it was popular back in the '90s, and yeah, and sometimes people would wear Harley. Sometimes the people would wear different shiny shoes, kind of look that have that boot style, usually black. I remember I had some cat boots that were shiny, and they were cool, man. Really cool shoes, shiny. They had some style. I actually bought it from Melrose. A lot of rebels would actually go to Melrose and buy a lot of their clothing and all that back then. Nowadays, you can't even go to Melrose. Uh, a lot of people are like saying it's like it's not the same anymore. And but back then it was cool. You go on, and you buy some boots and buy your vests and your white shirts and your Hauser pants and all that. So I would say the rebel scene kind of died out in the 2000s, you know, and I would say the house scene out here in Los Angeles died out in the 2000s, And what I didn't like is that you had mostly Mexicans in the house scene back then, back in the 90s. But then what happened, it got commercialized and watered down. You had these I don't know, commercialized raves and everything, and the whole music scene just changed. The music started sounding too much like trance, too slow, not enough fast bass, hard bass, not enough melodies. I don't know. The music changed. And so I kind of got discouraged. I just didn't like the house scene anymore, and I actually left it. And you would see a lot of whites taking over the whole rave scene, and even Asians, and they would overly exaggerate their big pants and over exaggerate the tiger look where it didn't even look right. Like they weren't even doing it right. People dressing like fairies and all that. I'm like, what the hell is this? uh, back in the 90s and late 80s, we had this rave scene or this houser scene. It was dope. You had these. It was kind of like these cartoon characters. We would try to dress like kind of like some funky cartoon characters in some sense. But I don't know what happened, but and I don't want to, let's say, oh, it's sometimes when I say it got watered down when all the whites and Asians took over, it kind of sounds a little racist, but it's not being racist. I'm actually not a racist, but the Mexicans, when that scene was happening, they kept it underground, man. It was dope. It wasn't all watered down and cheesy. And the music sounded dope too. It was hard. It was really good music, man. And I definitely enjoyed it. But now you have the younger kids nowadays. They're trying to bring that '90s look back. They're starting trying to dress like rebels and all that. I don't know who's they're even selling clothes like that. Like the '90s in some of these stores. And but then sometimes you got these people claiming that oh, this is the dance of the '90s, and no, it wasn't no shuffle and it wasn't no rocking, right? Let me tell you that I'm really on that because I don't like people trying to claim something that didn't even happen back then. um, and even back then, like in the rave scene, that we started doing even liquid back then. We were doing our waving, popping. For some of you groovers out there, yes, they were poppers. They were popping back then. They brought it to the house scene. The Tigers did, you know, because the Tigers were into the underground hip hop. They were popping back then, and they brought it into the house scene, right? And to this very day, this is why you see all the white gloves. The white gloves comes from the popping scene, and it evolved into the Mickey Mouse gloves, and all the lights and everything, all the little liquid styles and everything. So there was groovers too back then as well, and they were kind of like the poppers at times. Sometimes they would break dance too. Um, but and then you had the rebels too, and they had their style, and the rebels were stylish, and they would go up and down. They weren't breakdancing, right? And also you had what was called kind of like freestylers, right? Freestylers would they would do a lot of different stuff, and it was very connected to the groovers as well. They would pop and they would do like they would go up and down, spin on their kind of like do the I think it was called what is it, the 360s on their hands and all that. They were known for that. I know I couldn't spin on my hand like that, but I had friends who were freestylers who were into the house scene and everything. So that was pretty cool too. So definitely. So yeah, the house scene was it happened in the '90s, the golden era out here in Los Angeles. You had underground parties, backyard parties. underground. What's it called? You would have them at sometimes garages, right? So some people call them lofts or something like that, but like underground. I remember I went to Grand Avenue. That club was happening kind of too in downtown LA, and you would have like the house scene, you know, just like a regular house club, and then they would have an after hours, right? And then they had this garage right next to that, and you would stay there from like I don't know 3 a.m. to like all the way in the morning, and just people just dancing and chilling and listening to a lot of dope house music and all that, techno and everything. So we had that, we had it. We played house at our high schools, at the clubs, everything. To this very day, I mean, now it's like sometimes you got some, old school DJs, who are still around or even have came back. I know AJ Moore is doing some events these days, um, and Richard Vision still doing stuff. DJ Irene. I've been seeing a lot of DJ Irene and Richard Vision doing a lot of events. I actually attend some of them, and they play a lot of dope hard house and techno, old school '90s house music, even deep house. I even forget about that. Deep house, techno, hard house, all that stuff. Was back then. It was bumping, good melodies. And I don't know, after 2000s, I don't know. I just didn't like the music. It was too soft. It would like, it's not the kind of music that you really motivates you to dance, right? It's like it puts you to sleep. It's boring, right? And this is some of the criticism I have of some of these new DJs or even some of these old school DJs had adapted, you know, because you see some of these old school DJs, they might have played good music back in the '90s, but then now it's like they're playing this same old beat all the time, same old boring beat that's like not even fast and hard or anything like that. The music has no rhythm, right? Same. I actually I have friends that now said, "Oh, I don't like going to those events, man. Their music sucks. It's like whack." So it's like they play the same old boring beat, right? No, for you DJs listening to this, man, you need to really take it, you know, really, put some better music, you know, look into that whole old school stuff, hard house, techno, deep house. Get a good playlist going down, man. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to become a DJ and bring it back. No, just kidding. But I'm more of a dancer though. I'm still a dancer though. I go to these house dance events, and I was actually at a recent what is it? In Instagram, there's like it's called House um, Parties of the '90s or something like that. Sometimes they have events, and there was one out there in East LA, and so I went down there, and they're supposed it's supposedly an old school house '90s house theme, right? And I'm just looking around, and I'm like, man, these guys don't know how to dance. I'm like criticizing them in the back of my mind. I'm like, what's up with all this? These guys claim they're old school, but like, and they claim they're all about, the '90s and everything. And I'm just seeing people just like, man, they either they forgot how to dance or they never knew how to dance and they were kind of like wannabes, right? And so I'm like, man, what's up with all this? I'm just looking around like none of these guys know how to dance or none of them are getting down, and I would see just like one or two that was all right. And so I was just waiting and waiting. I'm like, oh man. Then I saw a little circle going on, and then I'm looking at this guy. I'm like, man, this guy, he's not even that good. And they're all getting excited with this guy. so I finally had it and said, no, I got to go in that circle. So I went in, I started dancing, bah, 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 just, doing my rebel style and everything. And everyone was like, whoa, like all clapping and everything. And all of a sudden, like, some guy, I guess he's not even old school. He's going hard style, hard style, hard style. And I'm like trying, like, what is this? Like, okay, are they trying to say that I'm hard style? Because I'm doing rebel style. Actually, the rebel style influenced this industrial dance. It influenced all this later on hard style. So I'm doing the rebel style, and well, a lot of these younger guys, I think they were like in their 30s, right? And they probably got into the house scene in the 2000s, right? But they never were there like in the early 90s, mid 90s, and all that. So when they see me dancing, they think it's hard style, but it's actually rebel style, you know? So, but yeah, it's like I, I, I was just looking around to see if any other rebels were there, dancing and everything. I didn't see anybody. I did see one guy though, and he's I think he's popular on YouTube, and I even went up to him. I said, "Hey man, I want to see you get down, man. Come on, man." I was trying to like get him into it, but I think I intimidated him because he saw me dancing. He's like, "Oh shoot!" Like he's like, I think he didn't want to dance, but that was not my intention. I just wanted like some old school heads, from the rebel scene to start dancing, man, start representing, get out there and show these youngsters or people who don't know how to dance, right? Or even these wannabes, right? Posers, right? There's a lot of posers out there that claim they're rebels and they don't even know how to dance like a rebel. So, um, anyways, and there's guys that claim they know all about the rebel scene, right? They don't even know how to dance like a rebel, anyways. But definitely, you know, we just want real history down here, real rebel style, real history about the '90s house scene, you know. Anyways, yeah. So for you youngsters out here, get your information correct. We didn't do no shuffles. We didn't do no rocking style. None of that Melbourne style, right? And sometimes I see these girls out here. They go and take a class on whacking, right? And they think they're like, oh, they're old school, right? But let me tell you this: the whacking back then in the Rebel House dancing, you also did footwork. You did kind of like that bouncy footwork, right? And it wasn't you're just standing there and doing all your hand stuff, and that's one of my criticisms. Even the and some of these girls say they're old school, but they're not. They actually go and they go and learn whacking, right, out there in the dance studio, and then they think they're old school, but they're not. And when I see a girl actually dancing, like I can tell if she has that old school style. And I see some of them out there. Some of the girls that I think they'll learn from their older sister, or even like maybe their mother who was a dancer into the rebel house dancing. And some girls actually represent. They do maintain that style. But when I see it, I was like, okay, she's dancing. She got that old school style right there. But when I just see a girl just doing voguing and whacking, but they're like, okay, where's the footwork, right? Where's the rhythm, right? You're not just standing there and just doing voguing and whacking, right? And we did have voguing and whacking back then, We or when I see these new house dancers, like, and they claim they're old school or they're doing old school style, and they're just some of the guys are just doing footwork, but they have no arm rhythms, no rhythm at all, or they're just looking like a shuffle or whatever. I said, no, that's not old school, man. You went and learned that in the dance studio, you know and that's not old school LA style right there. So LA had its own style, right? You know, and but yeah, and then when I see these girls doing this rocking style, this Melbourne style, I'm like, that's not old school, and they're claiming that it's old school, and it's not. It's not. Uh, and definitely. So I wish I would have footage, man. I wish I would have recorded a lot of stuff, because the '90s, like, it there needs to be preserved history on this whole thing. And you do see some videos from the '90s, and just look at the audience and how they're dancing. I would say the majority are not. They weren't. See, you had to distinguish between the regular people who went to the clubs and say the ones who would battle, you know, in the circle, right? Those were the real good dancers. Um, but I mean, it's go check out those old school footages of the '90s in the LA house scene, and you'll see none of them doing a shuffle, none of them doing the rocking Melbourne dance. You know, you'll see them. They're doing, that LA style. More the LA style. Uh, but anyways, yeah. So I think I'm gonna end it here, and put keep this up. This video up for actually people to actually you know come correct with the real LA history house dance scene, and you know and get the facts straight and correct. Like, we need to stop with this misrepresentation in some sense. Anyways, the way I am is I'm a dance instructor, and I love to get into dance history. I've read books on dance history, and different dances influence each other definitely. Um, you know, but house dance in general is like influenced from a lot of dances previously. I found out house dance is influenced by early top rocking, you know, Latin dance, salsa, Native American dance, um, you know, Aztec dancing, Mexica dancing, right? The Russian dance, um, popping, waving, whacking, voguing. There's so many tribal dance. I mean, there's so many influences, even tap and jazz, right? All that. There's so many influences to house dancing, so many rhythms, and but a lot of people contributed. You know, you had African black people that contributed. You had Native American people that contributed. You had Mexicans. You had brown folks in Latin America. All that. You know, a lot of people contributed. You even had Filipinos. I remember Filipinos getting down in the house scene too back then. So Salvadorians, Central Americans. I mean, out here in Los Angeles, we have a lot of different ethnicities, where the majority are Mexican, right? So Mexicans put it down on the West Coast for the house scene. You know, we put it down for the DJing, the dancing history, all that stuff. Out here in the San Fernando Valley, I'm from the 818 San Fernando Valley, and we had our backyard parties, and we had our party. We had DJs, Mexican DJs at our high schools, bumping the house and rave and all that stuff. Techno. We called it more like techno back then, house and techno. Um, but yeah, it's just there's a lot of history out here, a lot of history to this dance culture, this music culture. Anyways, so I guess I'm gonna end it here. If you just came in, go down and read my details below. If you want to contact me, hit me up on Instagram. or go to my dance website. I'm dance coach Rudy V. I teach different styles of dance. I'm an old school dancer. Been dancing since I was a kid. Started off as a break dancer and popper. Then in the 90s, actually late 80s and 90s, became a house dancer, involved in battling in the club scene, rebel style. I also had that groover style too as well. Especially coming from the popping scene. uh, and sometimes we would mix it up with the rebel and groover style too as well. And then got into the whole Latin dance scene and you know um, dancing salsa, bachata, cumbia, cha cha cha, merengue. Then he got involved in the whole rockabilly and swing dance scene, and I became an instructor. I love dance so much. It's been fun. I enjoy teaching it, and it's a good cardio too. Dancing out here, you burn calories, you move around. It's good for your health, man. Believe me. Get into dance. If you don't know how to dance, get into dance. And I'm out here in the San Fernando Valley too. I offer dance classes and private dance lessons as well. And I also teach house dancing too and popping as well. So some of those elements as well, some of the solo styles. Anyways, well, I'm gonna let you guys go. You guys have a good day and see you later.